Hello and welcome. You're listening to Exposed: Abortion in America, where we uncover the truth of the abortion industry. I'm your host, Eva Cooley, and in today's episode we welcome Wendy Burpee, a women's health clinic director who has a deeply moving abortion story about her experiences at Planned Parenthood. Wendy had 3 abortions at Planned Parenthood, and during her time there, she never saw a doctor, was never given life-affirming options, was never given a counseling session, and was never asked about the bruises that were all over her body from an abusive partner. Wendy now runs 2 women's health clinics where she provides the quality, compassionate care that she should have been given when she went to Planned Parenthood. So today on our podcast, we have Wendy Burpee joining us. And Wendy is a mother, she is a wife, and she is the executive director of 2 women's pro-life clinics. And Wendy has her own personal story that she's going to share with us today. So Wendy, thank you so much for being here. And could you go ahead and share your story with our listeners?
Well, it's an honor to be here, so thank you for asking me. I am always in awe of all this opportunity that God puts in front of me. He opens doors and I walk through so that we can tell the truth about what's happening to women who walk into Planned Parenthood because they don't come out the same. And I was 19 and I had left home. I had gone to college for a year and started dating this guy and became pregnant. And my family had kind of distanced themselves from me, and I only had his voice. And his voice said, hey, let's go find out what Planned Parenthood has to say. And I wasn't really knowledgeable about them as an organization. I knew that abortion was wrong. I was raised to believe that, and I did believe that. But when you're terrified and you're alone, and there's only one other person who's saying, just why don't we just go over and see what they have to say? And so we went in, and I was taken to a back room, and they did an ultrasound, but I was staring at the back of the machine and wondered what what are they seeing that I'm not allowed to see? And I was, 19 and naive. So I didn't say, can I see it? Can I see the baby? And that's, to this day, that's a thing that really is hard for me, that I don't really know how far along I was. And so they took me to another room, and I was, told to sit on a medical table. I was kind of inclined. And the lady came in and she said, well, here's some medication. This medication will, help to calm you down. And then you'll be able to talk to a doctor who will come in and, whatever other questions you have. And of course you have questions because you don't really know like what's going on and what you want to do. And so I sat and waited, and uh and then I just woke up in a completely different room, which is so unnerving to think about, that they um undressed you and they did all these things and you were kind of pushed around, and eventually, when it's over, the abortion was over, I was put into obviously some kind of wheelchair, and then unconscious, put into another room and plopped into a chair, sitting up. It's exactly like the movie Unplanned, if you've seen that. You wake up in that chair and you're just like, how did I even get here? And they come in and act like they've done you a favor and you're free to go. And I didn't even know what to say because I really hadn't decided. And I had somebody recently ask me, like, well, didn't you sign papers? And didn't you? And I was like, well, when you come in, you do sign a paper, that you're consenting to treatment, right? Um, but like any other medical organization or any other procedure, up until that procedure happens, you're just getting information, right? I went for information that I wasn't given. So how can I make it a final decision when I haven't been given all the information? Because let's say I had been 9 weeks and being in that ultrasound room as a director every day, I know how big that is now. And I see that. And that's a whole baby at 9 weeks. It's a very, very tiny little baby, but a whole baby. And I don't, I don't think I would have gone through with it. So that relationship kind of came to an end quickly. And I started dating this other guy a while later. And, he at first he was like exciting and distracting and, made me forget the decision that I had made and for a little bit. But very soon he became very abusive. He drank a lot. I wasn't raised with alcohol or with drugs. So it was all very new to me. And he was this party boy. And, I tried not to take that too seriously, but after a period of time, I was pregnant. And there's a lot more to that story, which you can read in the book, Running Toward Abortion. But, um, you know, he controlled every move I made and everything that I did. And I was easy to manipulate because I didn't feel good about who I was. So I allowed that to happen. And when I told him I was pregnant, uh, he and his mother had a discussion about how it wasn't good for him and he wasn't ready. And um, it was like I wasn't even part of it. And he came back from seeing her and said, we're not having a baby. And I said, I really want this baby. I want the baby. And, looking back at who I am today, I could have said, I'm having the baby and you can go pound sand, but I'm going to have the baby. But I wasn't, I was so weak-minded at that point and so controlled by him. So there I am going back to Planned Parenthood, which I couldn't barely believe that that was happening again. And, at least this time I knew what I was getting into, right? I knew what they were going to do. And he was a very, like I said, very abusive guy. So I was often covered with bruises from my neck all the way down to my wrists, from him grabbing me or punching me or slamming me into walls or whatever he was doing. And they could see that. They could see that I was an abused woman. And you would think it would be, number one priority, because they say they're there to protect women. But I think that day they were there to protect my abuser because they really joined with him that day in coercing me into aborting my second child. Um, they were a team that day to make sure that I eliminated my child. And so, same process, can't see the baby, never got to talk to the doctor. In his defense, think about it, these doctors, would you want to be seen really by the woman after woman all day long that you're ripping their babies out? And I mean, I wouldn't want anyone to see me if I was doing such a horrible thing. Um, but I went through with the second abortion, and then the next day, I went to work, couldn't afford to take off, and it was hard. I sat at a desk and I just didn't get up because it hurt so bad. And when I got home that night, I definitely knew something's not right. I was vomiting and I was just in terrible pain. And he got home and I said, you really should take me to a hospital. I think something's wrong. And he thought I was overreacting. But, um, if he had gone out that night and I had just stayed home and tried to go to sleep, like, I don't know what would have happened to me that night, But I went to the hospital, got into the emergency room, and passed out. And then they took me to the back and brought me to, and I explained that I'd had an abortion, and I was rushed into the back for an emergency D&C and repaired the uterus, which they had damaged, and a blood transfusion and a round of antibiotics. And so then they saved my life. So I was released a few days later and went home and just tried to survive one day at a time. I was so empty. And, he had gone out partying that night. He dropped me off at the hospital and went partying. He didn't come home for a day or two and never asked me what happened. Um, and I never brought it up because I didn't want to talk about it. And I just thought, Now my second child is gone, and what I'm left with is him. And it can't be worse than that. And I chose him over my child. And what kind of person does that? And so it was just a lot of heartbreak and self-loathing, I think, of myself. I just hated what I'd done. And then about 4 or 5 months later, even on birth control, I got pregnant again. And I didn't even tell him because I thought he'll just beat me up and say, "How did you let this happen?" So I just went there and, figured, well, that's what they're there for, right? That's all they care about is how you're going to pay. So I scraped the money together and I had another abortion. And then after that, I mean, I thought about suicide. Um, I had enough respect for my mother and for God that I didn't do that. But I thought about it a lot and didn't see my life as having any purpose anymore. That why would God even care what happened to me after that? And then my friend Joanna from high school, uh, we kind of reconnected. God let that happen, and she could tell I was in trouble. And she really was relentless in her pursuing of me. And my mother had tried that for years, but, Joanna was like a, you know, take no prisoners kind of girl. And she was like, come on, let's go. You've got to get out of this. And it took a bit, and I finally did leave. And there was some more to that story too, but eventually I met my husband, and we were married 2 years later. We've been married over 25 years, and God gave me kids, which I still can't get over it. I still can't get over that he gave me two boys and a daughter, and they're all young adults now, and more important to me than anything in the world. And so, I'm raising my kids, and I'm being a mom, and I'm back in church, and I'm doing all the things, and you know, that part of me got buried. And my husband did know about it, but no one else. And I kept that quiet because I didn't want the judgment of anyone, particularly people in the church. So when they were in high school, I heard about Genesis and the job opening, and I just thought it was helping moms and babies, not even really realizing it was um, focused on, or at that time it wasn't super focused on going after the abortion minded, and we didn't have ultrasound back then. So, but I thought, this sounds good, moms, babies, I can do it. So I took the job as director, and very quickly, other directors helped me understand that we needed to be a medical clinic. So we turned medical, and it was one of the best days of my life when we did our first scan. And we showed that young woman her unborn child, and it made all the difference in the world. And it's been just such an amazing experience since then. I was like, Lord, let me save three. If you let me save three, it will be the most amazing thing. And now it's in the hundreds. We're getting near 400 babies that have been saved in our clinic now since 2019. So God is, he's for life. So we know he's for us. And it's amazing to be in that room and be a part of those ultrasounds and be able to talk to women and give them truth, and all this nonsense about we're fake clinics and we force women, we're forced birthers. Somebody said that to me the other day. And it's really crazy, because we give them the truth. Now what they do with it is still up to them when they walk out the door. But nobody should be trying to shut down or go against a clinic that is just giving women the facts. This is what your baby looks like. This is the heartbeat. Here's what we can do for you. And Genesis has an amazing 3-year support program. So again, not at all what they say about us, right? How do you help these women? We help them a lot with housing and jobs and material assistance and church communities and counseling and all these things that they didn't have before.
Yeah.
And if they have little kids, like 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, we help with that too. So we want that process of motherhood to be successful for them, you know, even beyond that little baby that they're carrying. So that's what's been going on. And we have a great team here of women that have very strong hearts for the unborn and for women. We
Mm.
don't want to see them traumatized by abortion anymore. So that's what we do at Genesis. And then I decided to write my story, Running Toward Abortion. So that came out um, in 2022. And now I joined ambassador speakers and travel all over the place and share my story to help other clinics be able to raise money, or like we just did in Washington last week, to spread the truth of the harm that's being done to women at Planned Parenthood.
Wow. Thank you so much for just sharing that beautiful redemption story. And it is very interesting when you talk about all of the services that your clinics provide to women, the resources, the medical help. Yet Planned Parenthood on their website, they would refer to your clinics as dangerous.
Yeah,
They would say, don't believe these dangerous clinics and the lies that they're spreading, the
yeah,
misinformation, the dangerous care that they're providing when your own personal experiences with Planned Parenthood stands in very stark contrast with all of the wonderful services that you've just described that your clinics do. So I'd love to just ask you a few more questions about your experience at Planned Parenthood, and then I'd love to hear just a little bit more about what you're doing now. So a first question is, did you ever see any doctors when you went to Planned Parenthood? Did they provide you with specific medical staff to give you information?
I never saw a doctor, so it's really um, it's really amazing to think that you go to this place that says they're going to give you. I mean, what they're doing to you is the most invasive thing, right? Um, and you should have the right to talk to a doctor. But I never, and three times I never saw that guy or woman. I never saw that person. And um, I think, I mean, I would imagine that the person that did the scan had some kind of medical background, or else she wouldn't have been able to do that job. But beyond that, I don't know that those people were actual medical professionals. Um, and of course, I never saw the doctor, so I don't know what his background is either, or even why somebody would want to be involved in. It goes against the Hippocratic oath to do no harm.
Mhm.
And he did me a lot of harm that day, and certainly he did great harm to my unborn child.
Yeah, wow. And did you ever talk to a counselor? Were you ever given a counseling session or anything during one of these appointments, especially since you had visible signs of being abused at home? Did they ever show any concern about that?
No, it was obvious that I was in distress. Not one of them said, "Are you in trouble? Do you need help?" And instead, they just, "How you gonna pay? Get her in, get her out, and hand her back to the guy who is her abuser." They don't really care about any of that, because if they started to really care about women, then they wouldn't be able to continue doing what they're doing. If they really cared, how about if just one person had said, "What do you want? What do you want for this pregnancy? How do you feel?" But, that's a conversation we have at Genesis all the time. Tell me about what's going on in your mind right now. We don't tell her how to feel. I want her to tell me how she feels and what are the circumstances, and tell me what's going on. And there is no wrong answer. So when you listen and you care, by the time she's done that conversation, many of the women will say, "I don't want to have an abortion. I don't know what else to do." So now you've just heard her tell you, "I don't really want this, but I don't know what else to do." And then I can give options. Here's what you could do. I can't make her. I can't make her make a decision. but I can provide her options so that life seems possible.
Wow. And what do you think the biggest lie is that women believe when they go to a Planned Parenthood? Or what do you think the biggest lie is that you believed about Planned Parenthood when you first went there?
I think I believe that they were just giving you information. And of course, they could do an abortion, but that they would give you all the information though. I didn't think that they would withhold it from you. And I do remember now, this is 25 years ago. So back then, the marketing strategy was sell these girls on the fact that it's just a clump of cells. Now, we know scientifically that that is not true, that a baby is a baby no matter how small from conception. But, you know, at that time that was the push. It's just a clump of cells. It has no, feeling. It doesn't know this is happening. It's so if you do it, it's not a big deal. It's not. So when you are scared to death and you are alone, you want to believe that. Now, later on, I don't care how you were brought up, you know it's not true. You just know. But that's what they were selling at the time, you know, and probably still do to some point, but I bought into that. And, not remembering or, anything really beyond that, the medication, whatever it was that I took that day, um, I mean, robbed me of anything that happened beyond the point of being sitting on that table. So, yeah, it would have been nice to have somebody ask me what I wanted or was I okay? Like we if we saw a woman like that come into Genesis, we'd be all over that.
Can you tell me more specifically what it would look like if a woman came into your clinic at Genesis and was scared and was alone? How would you and your team care for her?
So we have a very great process here. The first thing they do is meet with our nurse, and she does a confirmation pregnancy test. And if that test comes up positive, then depending on how far along she is, we can take her into our physician's assistant, who's also trained in ultrasound. And she's amazing, and she'll do a scan, and that allows that client to see her unborn child in whatever phase it is. And we can see a heartbeat at like 5 weeks, 6 days. Not every time, but we often can. And seeing that little flicker is is amazing. And it helps that client understand that what is inside of her is a living human being, a little piece of her. And so we do that, and I'm usually in the room for that. And then she's given all the information and pictures and all that. And then she comes into me, and I just want to hear what she has to say. I'm there to listen to whatever's going on. And the circumstances could be from I'm too young, I'm too old, I can't afford more kids. My boyfriend tells me I need to have an abortion. I don't know what to do. I don't have an apartment. All these things. And they're all real and they're all important to listen to because that's her story. So we listen, and what we say at Genesis is we attack the circumstances, not the baby. And so we take notes and we look at like what does this woman need to be able to take on motherhood. And then we start making a list, and we give her some options, some in-house, some we refer out to as far as maybe housing, different things that we're connected to that we can help her. And we really just rally around her as a team and say, we can help you make this be possible. Now, on the other side of it, some of these young women go out and they choose differently, and that's hard. And we know that that happens. Um, but we do such a great job here of making people feel loved and not judged that we've seen girls come back here. and say, you know, well, I'm pregnant again 6 months later, but you guys were so great. And I'm going to keep the baby this time. And I just, couldn't think of a different place I'd want to go. Or we've had girls come back and say, I had an abortion, but now I'm really struggling. And Planned Parenthood has no interest. They have no method of helping. Um, will you help me? And we'll counsel with them because I know firsthand how incredibly difficult that is to go through that. And so we provide a lot of services, believe it or not, for women who are coming out of Planned Parenthood really broken and wounded, and we're picking up the pieces.
I think that's so beautiful that you can say that you've had so many countless women come back and that they know that your clinic is a safe space. Because I just spoke a few weeks ago with Myra Rodriguez, who was an ex-Planned Parenthood worker, and she
Hmm.
said that in all of her time at Planned Parenthood, she never had a woman come back and say thank you. Not once did she hear about a woman coming back. And that's very telling. And it's very telling that at your women's health clinic, even if they decided to go and have an abortion, they still know that they can come back to you because you have created for them a space where they feel loved, a space where they feel heard. And I think that juxtaposition with Planned Parenthood having so many little women come back to say thank you just shows
Hmm.
which side really truly does care about women. And it's not
Yeah,
Planned Parenthood.
absolutely not. And we had an admin that used to be here until she had a baby, got married and had a baby. But she called Planned Parenthood and she said, "Listen, I just want to talk to somebody because, she's trying to see what they're going to say. I've you provided me this abortion, but I can't stand it. I I'm I feel suicidal. Will you help me?" And they said, "I'm sorry, we don't provide those kinds of services. You can reach out to some kind of mental health provider, but it's very common for a few months to have a postpartum after effect."
Wow.
So basically, we got what we wanted from you. You're on your own. And
And
that was the end of it.
what they got was the bill. What they got was the payment.
Right.
That's
So
what
they're
they
done.
really.
They're done with you. They don't care what happens to you after that. They don't care if, you go back to, I mean, it gets dark, right? I mean, sex trafficking. I mean, we're giving pills to, people that are running organizations like that in this country. Like, Planned Parenthood is connected to darkness in so many aspects. It's incredible. But here we are, acting like this is a woman's right to, abort her own child. And, I look at the culture of women today and it's incredibly sad. It's incredibly sad because they're drinking the Kool-Aid and they're buying into it and they don't realize that they're being used by an organization to promote their own culture of death.
Yeah. It's so heartbreaking. And just as we conclude here, do you have anything that you would say to a woman who was in your shoes? Maybe there's a woman right now who's listening to this podcast episode who is saying, I don't know if I can do it. What would your message be to a woman in those shoes?
I think I have those women in my office all the time, every week. And I always say to them, if I could go back and be in your shoes right now and make a different decision, I would every time. And it does seem difficult in this moment, but God is in control and He can make a way. And I think He honors those who honor life. So, in fact, probably at least once a week, I say there's a reason why you're here today, because maybe you think Google found us, but God had you find us so that we could come around you and create a support system that will launch you into motherhood in a really positive way. We want your whole life and your future to be better for both you as the mother and the child, and you will never have to live with the dark regret of abortion. And a baby is always a joyful miracle.
Wow. Thank you so much for that answer. That is a beautiful way to end our podcast episode. So, Wendy, I just want to say a huge thank you to you for coming on and for being vulnerable with our listeners. It is not a small thing for us to be given the opportunity to hear your story, for you to share so many of these details that women need to hear. So just thank you so much for being willing to do that. And I look forward to hearing more about your ministry and your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Exposed Abortion in America. Our mission is to give you, our listeners, the truth when it comes to exposing the abortion industry. Tune in next week to hear more about the secrets, horrors, and history of Planned Parenthood.